Okay, I want you to picture a scenario that by every modern standard of health and safety should be an absolute death sentence.
Okay.
You are living in a stone hut on a wind-blasted island. There are no windows. There's no chimney.
Right.
In the center of the room, a fire made of peat, which is basically, compressed turf, is burning constantly, 24/7.
Uh-huh.
The smoke has nowhere to go but up, so it just drifts and hangs there, seeping slowly through the thatched roof.
It sounds like a scene from a Dickens novel or a public health inspector's worst nightmare.
It is. It's dark. The air is thick with this blue, acrid haze. And oh, by the way, you are sharing this single room not just with your family, but with the farm animals.
Oh, wow.
Exactly. Cows, chickens, they're just living in the corner, right next to where you sleep and eat. By all logic, the people living here should be wheezing, sickly, and just riddled with respiratory infections.
You would absolutely expect it to be a hotbed for disease. I mean, poor ventilation, all that particulate matter from the smoke, the proximity to animal waste, it checks every single box for a toxic environment.
But here's the paradox we're grappling with today. What if I told you that the people in those smoke-filled windowless huts had what one researcher called immunity of a high order?
Okay.
That they were virtually immune to tuberculosis, which was the deadliest killer of their time. And get this, the people living just 20 miles away, in modern homes with clean air and chimneys, they were dying in droves.
That is the hook that really pulls you into the work of Dr. Weston Price. It completely flips the script on what we think causes disease.
It's backward to everything we think we know about hygiene, but that is exactly what Dr. Price discovered. Today, we're cracking open Chapter 3 of his famous book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration.
And the chapter is called The Isolated Gaels. This is such a fascinating case study. It takes us to the windswept Outer Hebrides of Scotland, specifically the Isle of Lewis. And honestly, this deep dive is going to challenge a fundamental belief most of us hold. The idea that just avoiding germs is the most important factor in staying healthy.
It's the ultimate showdown, germs versus terrain. So let's travel to Scotland. We have Price's notes and the research here. Set the scene for us. What kind of environment are we dealing with on the Isle of Lewis?
Well, to understand the people, you have to understand the land.
Yeah.
And the Isle of Lewis is intense.
Intense how?
It's off the northwest coast of Scotland. And the most defining feature is the wind. It blows with such ferocity from the Atlantic that trees literally cannot grow there.
No trees.
Very, very few. The landscape is mostly barren, rolling moorland, and the soil isn't your typical rich farmland. It's mostly peat.
Peat?
Yeah, it's vegetable matter that's partially decayed in water. So that makes growing standard vegetables very, very difficult. You aren't going to see lush gardens full of lettuce or tomatoes there.
So it's windy, barren, damp, and you can't really grow a salad to save your life. Sounds like survival mode every single day. And this brings us back to those houses you mentioned. The text calls them black houses.
Right, the black houses, or in Gaelic, Tían Duba. These were the traditional dwellings. They were constructed of thick stone and mud walls with thatched straw roofs. But the engineering around the heating is what's so wild.
The lack of a chimney.
Exactly. They burn peat for heat, and peat produces this really dense, aromatic, oily smoke.
And with no chimney.
The smoke would fill the upper part of the house and then just filter out to the straw roof. And the text mentions this actually had a purpose. It saturated the thatch with creosote.
Creosote, like what they put on telephone poles?
Same stuff. It acted as a preservative. In that damp climate, straw would rot incredibly quickly. The smoke kept the roof dry and stopped the rot.
That is actually incredibly clever.
It is. It also kept the thatch warm, so the grass on the roof kept growing, adding more insulation.
But for the people inside, it meant living in a perpetual haze.
A perpetual haze. And let's not forget the roommates, the livestock. Yes, often cattle or poultry would share the living space, usually in one end of the structure. The floor was just earth.
So let's unpack this from a modern perspective. You've got poor visibility from smoke, zero active ventilation. You've got animal waste near where you're making food. Through the lens of modern sanitation, this is a respiratory disaster.
Scientifically, you would expect high rates of asthma, bronchitis, and especially tuberculosis. TB is an airborne bacterial infection. It thrives in unventilated, crowded, dark spaces.
The Black House is theoretically a TB incubator.
Exactly.
And here's where it gets really interesting. That's not what Dr. Price found.
No. And to really highlight the contrast, Dr. Price looked at two distinct groups on the same island. He compared the traditional villagers in the black houses to the people living in the main port city, Stornoway.
Stornoway was the modernized area, right?
Yes, it was the hub of commerce. And by the standards of the time, the housing there was vastly superior. The homes had windows, they had chimneys to vent smoke.
So clean air, modern architecture. They should be the healthy ones.
You would think. But Stornoway was being ravaged by the white plague tuberculosis. The hospitals were overflowing. The text notes that many young people there, particularly women in their 20s, were dying. It was a full-blown crisis.
Okay, so the people with the clean air are dying of a lung disease. Meanwhile, what's happening back in the smoky black houses?
Virtually no tuberculosis.
None.
I mean, it was almost non-existent among the traditionalists. Dr. Price observed that despite inhaling peat smoke all day, despite the lack of sunlight, despite the animals, these people were immune.
That just stops me in my tracks every time. It's so counterintuitive. Why? Why did the people breathing smoke survive while the people breathing fresh air got sick?
That is the million-dollar question. And Dr. Price realized the variable wasn't the air, it wasn't the germs. The TB bacillus was likely present in both communities. The difference was the host.
It wasn't about the bullet, it was about the vest.
Exactly. And that vest is built by nutrition. In Stornoway, because it was a port city, they had access to modern foods, imported foods.
I can guess what those were. The foods of commerce, as Price calls them.
The usual suspects of the industrialized diet: white flour, jams, sugar syrups, canned goods, chocolate.
So high calorie, but nutritionally empty.
Right. They were eating for energy.
Mm.
Sugar gives you a rush, but they weren't getting the building blocks for, cellular repair.
Sugar and starch. Okay, so now let's look at the Gaels and the black houses. You said vegetables couldn't really grow there. So no kale smoothies, no oranges for vitamin C. What on earth were they eating that gave them lungs of steel?
They turned to the sea. And they turned to the one grain that could survive that harsh climate: oats. But it wasn't just fish and oatmeal. It was very specific parts of the fish. There's one dish that Dr. Price highlights as being central to their immunity.
I remember reading this. Let's just say it sounds rustic.
It's called crapet hide.
Crapid-eyed.
Yes. It translates roughly to stuffed head.
I'm already nervous.
It's actually a brilliant example of nose-to-tail eating. You take the liver of a codfish,
Okay.
you chop it up and mix it with oatmeal. Then you take a codfish head, the actual head,
Go ahead.
you clean it out, stuff that liver and oat mixture inside, and then steam the whole thing.
Wow, okay. That is definitely not something you're going to find on a Michelin menu today. But I'm guessing this was a nutritional bomb.
A superfood bomb, honestly.
Yeah.
Let's break down the biochemistry of crapet hide. Why was this the shield against TB? First, the cod liver.
We've talked about liver before. It's nature's multivitamin.
Specifically, cod liver is one of the richest natural sources of fat-soluble vitamins, vitamin A and vitamin D.
Yeah.
If you remember our deep dive into the Swiss villagers, they got these vitamins from high-quality dairy butter. The Gaels didn't have lush pastures, so that they got it from the fish liver.
And why are A and D so important for the lungs specifically?
Vitamin A is absolutely essential for the health of your mucous membranes, the lining of your lungs, throat, and gut. It maintains the barrier that stops bacteria from invading. If you're deficient in vitamin A, the walls of your cells become permeable. Bacteria can just walk right in.
So without that cod liver, the smoke in the black house might have actually killed them. But the vitamin A reinforced the lung tissue.
Precisely. It toughened the tissue. And then vitamin D, of course, is the immunomodulator. It activates the immune system's killer cells, specifically the ones that hunt down bacteria like tuberculosis.
But there's more to the dish than the liver. You mentioned the head.
Right. By steaming and eating the tissues around the head and the bones, and likely consuming the gelatinous broth it created, they were getting huge amounts of minerals: calcium, phosphorus, and iodine.
Which brings us to the oats. I assume we aren't talking about those little packets of instant oatmeal.
Definitely not. This was whole grain oats, grown locally. And here's a detail people often miss: the soil. We said the soil was peat, which is nutrient poor. But Price notes that the Gaels amended the soil with sea sand and seaweed.
They fertilize the soil with the ocean.
Yes, seaweed is incredibly rich in trace minerals, so the oats absorb those minerals from the soil. When the Gaels ate the oats, they weren't just eating carbs, they were eating a mineral delivery system.
That is fascinating. So the diet was simple seafood, especially the organs, and oats grown in sea-enriched soil. It was like a closed nutritional loop.
And it highlights the concept of nutrient density. They didn't have variety, they ate the same thing almost every day. But every single bite was loaded with data for the body.
Dr. Price didn't just base his conclusions on the fact they weren't coughing, though. He was a dentist, after all. He looked at the hard evidence in their mouths.
He did, and the data is just staggering. When Dr. Price examined the teeth of the traditional Gaels, the ones eating the crapidide, he found a rate of tooth decay of only 1.3%.
1.3%, that's practically perfect. I don't think you'd find that in any modern city today.
It's unheard of. Now, compare that to the residents of the port city, Stornoway, who were eating the jams, white bread, and chocolate. Their rate of tooth decay was nearly 30%.
That is a massive jump, from almost 0 to 1/3 of the teeth being rotten.
Yeah.
And these people are genetically the same, right?
That's the critical point. Same genetics. Often cousins living a few miles apart. The only difference was the fuel.
It wasn't just cavities, though. Price talks about physical degeneration. This is where it gets a little scary. He looked at the faces of the children.
He did. He saw a change in architecture. The children eating the traditional diet had broad faces, wide dental arches. Their teeth came in straight because the jaw was wide enough to hold them. No need for braces.
And the Stornoway kids.
Narrow jaws. The face literally grew differently. And because the jaw was too narrow, the teeth came in crowded and crooked. Price specifically noted pinched nostrils and a lengthening of the face.
Pinched nostrils. That connects back to the breathing issue, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And this is a connection modern orthodontics are finally catching up to. If the jaw is narrow, the airway is often restricted, which leads to mouth breathing.
Which bypasses the nose's filtration system.
And lowers nitric oxide levels, which reduces immunity. So a narrow jaw isn't just a cosmetic issue, it's a structural failure that leaves you open to infection.
Price argued that the external structure reflects the internal integrity.
Exactly. If the body doesn't have enough minerals, calcium, phosphorus, vitamin A to build a wide, strong jawbone, it implies it also doesn't have the resources to build a robust immune system.
The cavity in the tooth is just a symptom. The real problem is the collapse of the whole system.
Right. The house is being built with crumbling bricks.
This really brings us to the synthesis of this whole thing.
Yeah.
The debate between hygiene and nutrition. We grew up thinking hygiene is king. Wash your hands, sterilize the counter, and obviously that has value.
Of course.
But this story suggests we might have the hierarchy wrong.
It suggests a new hierarchy, often referred to as the terrain theory. Think of the body as a garden, the terrain. And think of the germs, like the tuberculosis bacteria, as weeds.
Okay, I'm with you.
In the modern view, we try to kill all the weeds. We spray pesticides, we sanitize everything. But Dr. Price's conclusion from the Isle of Lewis is that if the terrain is rich and robust, the weeds can't take root.
So the Gaels and the Black Houses were living in a weedy environment, smoke, bacteria everywhere. But their soil, their bodies, was so fortified with vitamin A and D from the cod liver that the tuberculosis bacteria just bounced off.
Essentially, yes. The bacteria landed, but it found no purchase. The immune defenses were so active that the infection was neutralized immediately.
And the Stornoway residents?
They had a clean garden externally. But internally, their soil was depleted by sugar and refined flour. So as soon as the TB germ landed, and they always do eventually, it found a weak terrain and just took over.
It's a powerful realization. We spend so much energy scrubbing the world around us, but we might be neglecting the fortress inside us.
It really challenges the modern obsession with sterilization. Dr. Price isn't saying, go live in a smoky hut. He's not saying hygiene is bad, but he is saying that a sterile environment cannot save you if your internal biology is collapsing from a lack of nutrients.
It's the difference between a bubble and a shield. Hygiene is a bubble. It works until it pops. Nutrition is a shield that goes with you everywhere.
That's a great analogy. And remember, these people didn't have antibiotics. They didn't have vaccines for TB. Their food was their only medicine.
It makes you look at a piece of fish differently. It's not just calories, it's instructions. It's data telling your body how to build the wall.
And it shows how adaptable humans are. We can survive on wind-blown, peat-covered islands with no vegetables, living with cows in the living room, as long as we respect the nutritional laws of nature.
But once we break those laws, once we introduce the sugar and the white flour, the collapse happens fast.
Terrifyingly fast, within one generation. That's what Price showed. The parents in Stornoway might have had broad faces, but their children, raised on the store-bought food, had the narrow jaws. It doesn't take centuries to lose our health. It takes one childhood of poor nutrition.
So what does this all mean for us today? We aren't living in black houses, and I doubt many of our listeners are going to rush out to stuff a cod's head with liver and oatmeal tonight.
Though if you do, please send us pictures.
Please do, but seriously, what's the takeaway?
I think the takeaway is to shift our locus of control. We often feel helpless against disease. We fear the bug that's going around. But this research gives us agency. It says you have control over your terrain. You can fortify yourself.
It's about focusing on nutrient density over just convenience.
Yes. It's asking yourself, where are my fat-soluble vitamins coming from? Am I eating whole foods that require chewing or soft processed foods? Are my building blocks high quality?
It's about building resilience. The Gaels were resilient. The environment tried to break them. The wind, the cold, the smoke. But their diet made them unbreakable.
And the modern residences stored away were fragile. The environment was easier, but they broke under the pressure of the disease because they lacked that structural integrity.
It really is an incredible story. From a tiny, smoke-filled hut in Scotland comes one of the most important lessons in immunology.
It proves that nature often provides the solution, even in the harshest places, if we just know where to look.
Well, this has been a journey. We've gone from the peat fires of the Hebrides to the microscopic battleground of the immune system.
It certainly has.
As we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on. We live in a world that is obsessed with sanitizing. We use antibacterial soap, we filter our air, we panic about surfaces. But based on what we learned today, ask yourself this. If you had to choose between living in a perfectly sterile, hospital-grade room, but eating only donuts and soda, or living in a messy, slightly dusty room with a dog, but eating nutrient-dense whole foods, which one would actually keep you safer in the long run?
It's a question that might change how you prioritize your entire life.
I think I know which room I'd pick, even if it smells a little like peat smoke.
I'll join you there. I'll bring the oats.
Deal. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the wisdom of the past. Stay curious, stay nourished, and we'll see you next time.
Goodbye, everyone.